Okay, is everybody well? Can I get on the participants a thumbs up or a yes if everybody's doing fine? Dagmara from Poland, that's terrific. Good. I see lots of thumbs up on the screen. That's great. And smiles. That's what I want to have. I was so pleased to hear the talks, to hear what you all care about. One of the participants had a beautiful message this morning in the Slack workspace. I think it was in the general. Yeah, it was Celestina. I don't know, Celestina, if you're here, but I thought that the quote. Yes, Celestina is here. She's in Team 9. That a quote that I think is so true: an accomplished teacher is a perpetual student, and I couldn't agree more with that quote. It's so true. We're all still students. We're all still learning. In fact, life is learning, and the best thing that we can do is to instill that notion of continuous learning on our students. I think that's probably the most important skill to teach them. So let's see, Sean, I'm going to close my chat very quickly because my brain can't really be split between two things, and maybe Isa can monitor the chat. So don't message me privately. I see Holly has asked to be renamed. Holly, can you send that chat to Sarah? She's doing the renaming, not me. She has the host privileges. I'm just a participant or a presenter soon. So please ask Sarah to do that for you, and do not chat me privately because I'm going to close the chat and I won't be able to see that. In fact, let me close the chat now because it distracts my brain. In fact, I lost track of what I wanted to say. I was talking about lifelong learning, but I think it's important that I get started here because I have a lot of ground to cover. Based on what I heard in the past few days, I've adjusted my message. No, not my message, my talk. The message is still the same. It's the importance of social interactions. And therefore, I have a little bit more ground to cover than I'd originally planned. So I'm not going to spend much more time chatting here, and I will get started. I'm going to share my screen. So reminder, do not chat me privately because nobody will see it. I'm going to share my screen. And as I share my screen, one of the things you may want to do is go to the top of my shared screen and you'll see options. It'll say that you're seeing my shared screen, and then it'll have options next to it. So go to options and pull down until you see side by side and make sure that that's checked. And that way you can see me, and you can see, if you go to speaker view, you see just me. If you go to gallery view, you see other users as well. Choose whichever you prefer. And then there's a divider between the side that has the video and the side that has the screen. Drag it to whatever makes sense for you. So thank you for joining. And as I said, I'm going to be talking about the importance of social interactions in education, which is always important, but even more so now that we're remote. And as you know, Harvard has announced that we'll be remote the entire year. Great news yesterday. The government dropped its requirement on the F1 visa, which would have been a complete disaster. So you can imagine how I was jumping up and down with joy when I got that announcement. So a number of years ago, I think 6 or 7, I forgot, I decided to make a fresh start. I mean, many of you have heard about the work that I've done in education with peer instruction. Tom Petit paved the way beautifully for my talk yesterday by talking about peer instruction and concept test. But 7 years ago, I decided I would make a fresh start and in a sense, shove everything I'd done in my career at Harvard in education and ask myself the question, if I were to design the best possible educational experience for my students who are not physics majors, they're engineering majors, pre-meds, people who are not taking physics because they want to learn physics, they're taking physics because they have to take physics. If I were to do that, what would it look like? Because essentially peer instruction, the reason I developed peer instruction, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in just a second, was simply a way to fix a problem in my class, namely that my students weren't really learning. I was not really starting with a blank slate. It was, in a sense, taking something that's broken and putting a Band-Aid over it to make it a little bit better. And I wanted to ask myself, if I were to start completely from scratch, without any baggage, without, thinking about, how do you best learn in a given learning space? No, I actually even designed the learning space from scratch for this particular course. You see a picture from that course on the screen here. And during that time, I so happened to be reading a book that I mentioned earlier on day one when Alan November was online. He wrote this book, Who Owns the Learning? I think it's a beautiful title. Think about it. Who is it who owns the learning in a typical classroom? I think more often than not, it's the instructor who owns it rather than the students. I hope that Alan on Friday will talk a little bit about this because I think it's a very important subject. And what really got me in this book was not just the title, but the preface of the book. In the preface of the book, he describes something that happened to him when he started his teaching career in a high school not very far from here, Lexington High School, which is a public high school, in the early 80s. You may remember the early 80s was the emergence of the PC, Apple was the Macintosh, IBM was the PC. And Lexington High School, being in a relatively affluent suburb of Boston, was one of the very first high schools to have a computer lab in a time that nobody really knew what to do with a computer lab. And Alan was in charge of that computer lab. And he recounts that on a weekend morning, he got a call from the Lexington police, I think it was, that there had been a break-in the computer classroom in his high school, in his computer lab. And would he please come to punish the perpetrator? So he drives from his home in Marblehead to Lexington, which is like about a half-hour drive, arrives at the high school, sees the windows of the computer classroom, none are broken, goes inside the high school. The door has not been forced open. He opens the door. All of the computers are still there. None is missing. There is just one strange thing. There's a student sitting at one of the computers. So he walks up to the student and he says, "Gary, what are you doing here?" And Gary looks up at him and says, "I want to learn how to program the computer." And that's when he realized that if somebody wants to learn, they'll do anything. They'll break the law. You can't stop them from learning. And in a sense, we are all born learners. When we're 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, you, me, our students, everybody around us, don't stop asking why. We were wired to want to understand how the world functions. It's a basic need of the human brain. We're wired, in a sense, we're all wired to be scientists, whether you want it or not. I mean, every single person is wired to want to explain how things work. It's a basic survival mechanism in a sense. In a sense, it's a sad fact that education beats this innate curiosity out of us. And by the time you get your students in your classes, and maybe it's not education. I mean, I don't mean education as the K-12 system. I mean education in general, including society and the education that we get outside of the classroom. By the time we get the students in our classes, you and yours, me and mine, it's no longer about the why, about the how. It's about give me the answer so I can pass the test. And that innate curiosity is gone. So I was thinking, as I was designing this new class that I wanted to teach, is there a way to sort of get my students to break into my class for physics? Can you somehow design an educational environment that creates an ownership of learning physics? And it became very quickly clear to me that that would not be as easy as the computer. I mean, as we all know, technology can be addictive. So I realized pretty quickly that I had to invent some kind of a Trojan horse and hide the physics inside the Trojan horse. And the Trojan horse that I used was nothing really new. It's sort of a merger of two existing pedagogies. Team-based learning to create a social responsibility for the learning, and project-based learning to create an intrinsic motivation for learning. I realized that in all these years that I taught pre-meds and engineers, even after introducing peer instruction, at the beginning of the year, I would essentially tell my students, I mean, not that I literally told that to them, but essentially I would tell them, here is my book, learn it, it's good for you. Because as a physicist, obviously we're kind of biased towards our own discipline, and I probably don't need much time to convince you, probably no time to convince you that the type of skills you learn in physics are good for anybody who wants to be an engineer, a doctor, a politician, whatever. The type of reasoning skills you learn are useful. But put yourselves in the shoes of a pre-medical student, somebody who wants to go to medical school. You're taking a lot of fun biology courses, but you're told by your concentration and by the medical schools who are going to evaluate your application, you must take physics in order to get into medical school. So you're taking this course, you might not really be excited, you're probably not excited, you've been frustrated by the AP test you took before. And now you come into the class of Eric Mazur, and the first thing he says is, trust me, physics is good for you. It'll help you with your career. I mean, I don't think that would convince me if I were in their shoes. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to put the content aside. I'm going to put the book aside. And rather than telling them, learn physics, it's good for you, I'm going to tell them, we're going to work on some really exciting projects. And at first sight, the project doesn't even have, an obvious physics smell to it. And I try to add to the project a component of empathy or social good. And by talking about this component of empathy or social good, often the students get really excited about the project. And once they're really excited about the project, I tell them, here's my book. You may want to have a look at it. It may help you with your project. So the content, and I think this is a really important point, the content of the course, rather than being a goal in its own right, becomes a means or a vehicle, if you want, to accomplish a goal that's much more meaningful in the minds of the students. And I found, I won't be able to talk too much about the projects and so on, although I'll be happy to stick around during lunch and other times to talk to you more about it. And I'll give you some resources at the end that point you to more details. So So the projects are sort of the glue that holds the entire course together. There's one project each month, 6 projects for the entire year, 3 in the fall, 3 in the semester. The team is to form, as I said before, a social responsibility for the learning. I assign people, and I'll talk a little bit about team-based learning, and I'll make you experience team-based learning, but we won't be able to do it completely. Again, I'll give you a resource later on if you're interested in more detail. It's not just group work. There are very specific criteria for the teams and also for the design of the curriculum that works well for teams. One huge mistake to make is to assign a curriculum designed for individuals to teams. Because let's say you have 4 people in a team. That's what we're doing today. By the way, if you're wondering what that number is in front of your name, that's your team assignment for a little exercise or 2 little exercises that we'll do during my presentation here. But let's say you have 4 people on a team, which we have today too, and you give a curriculum designed for individuals to that team. Sarah, who is on that team, is the best student in the class. She aces all the tests. Now she gets that assignment, which is a team assignment. And she looks at it and she thinks, I can do this. Paul and Eric and Catherine look at it and they say, well, I'm not sure I can do this, but I'm sure that Sarah can. And we're all too happy to let Sarah do most of the work. And Sarah, we don't learn very much because she's doing the work. And Sarah is annoyed that we get to ride her coattails without putting in the same effort as she does. So one of the first requirements in any type of meaningful team assignment is to make the assignment significantly harder so that no single individual can ace that. That's a very important rule, I think, for any type of meaningful group work or teamwork. You have to make it hard enough so that no single individual can ace it. And that's a problem, especially at my institution, where students become suicidal if they get an A-, because they have come, to Harvard by always excelling at everything, by always getting an A, by always being at the front of their class. And if they get anything that is not, stellar, they become completely depressed. They have not learned to cope with failure. Well, I'm sorry, that's not how society works. And we have to do a better job really preparing our students to deal with failures and setbacks. We have to see failure not as an endpoint in its own right, but as a stepping stone to greater success. And we have to build in room for improvement. So that, for me, in my class at Harvard, that has meant and still means a lot of hand-holding. I have to keep reminding my students, look, if there's no room for improvement, you're not going to learn. And also we have to adjust the assessment to this approach. I am all in favor of going to a more mastery-based evaluation rather than numerical grades, which I don't think mean very much. If you're interested in my views on assessment, you can go to YouTube and there's a talk called Assessment, the Silent Killer of Learning, because I think that through our assessment, we essentially force students in looking at ways to satisfy the assessment, which are not necessarily in line with our learning goals. But I don't have time to really spend much time about it. Again, happy to have a conversation about this later. So that course that I designed 6 or 7 years ago has no lectures and no exams. And it's project-based. And there are a number of activities that I will describe later on. But first, I want to go back in time to when I started as a professor at Harvard. And I remind you of what I said the very first day. I never intended to be a professor. I never wanted to be a professor. My father was a professor of physics. My mother was teaching art history at the university where I enrolled. And I thought, I'm going to be doing something useful in my life. I'm going to industry. life worked out very differently. But when I started teaching at Harvard, now 36 years ago, my God, time flies. I never asked myself, how am I going to teach? In fact, the very first time that I really asked myself that question was 7 years ago when I designed this new course. I never asked myself how to teach. It was just perfectly clear to me. I was going to do to my students what my instructors had done to me. I think we all tend to do that unconsciously, right? To project our own experiences onto the world around us. I had learned physics by sitting in a class, listening to lectures. Therefore, I was going to lecture to my students. This is a picture of me as an assistant professor a long time ago at Harvard. It's a very old picture. It was taken BC, before computers. You can see I'm using an overhead projector with plastic slides on which you could write or print something out. Now, as I said, we all tend to do that. And I was asked to teach a course that no one in my department wanted to teach, physics for these pre-meds. This was at that time a purely pre-med class. Now, in my own self-defense, I'd like to point out that probably the people who taught me when I was a student made exactly the same assumption, hidden assumption, when they started teaching. They had been students sitting in a lecture, and therefore, when they started teaching, they lectured. And same, one generation further back, and generation after generation after generation. I mean, I guess everybody has been making that same assumption. I learned it in the lecture, therefore I'm going to lecture, all the way back to this guy here. This is actually an illustration from an illuminated manuscript from the 15th century, 14 something, I think just around the time that Gutenberg invented the printing press. And it represents a scene from the 11th century or the 12th century, I forgot exactly, at the University of Bologna. This is King Henry VIII of Germany giving a lecture, guest lecture, at the University of Bologna. And, there's an uncanny resemblance between this picture and the picture I showed you before of me lecturing. I can't claim I was the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire like he was, but I mean, look at it. He's standing in front, the center of attention. The students in the front row pay close attention, are taking notes. They look a little bit more bored in the second row. And if you go all the way in the back, these two people are having a conversation with each other, clearly not paying attention at all. And then there's this guy here in the front. I don't know if he's cringing in agony or fast asleep. I mean, the resemblance is amazing. We're no longer wearing these clothes, except at graduation, I guess, to remind ourselves that, we're steeped in medieval traditions. But by and large, I think it's fair to say that very little has changed in the educational approach for close to over a millennium. The invention of the book has not much changed. In fact, we call lectures lectures, and because they started with reading notes, the word lecture comes from the Latin verb to read. And in fact, there's an academic degree, an academic rank in the UK called lecturer, a person who reads. So this predates the invention of the book, because that was the only way of transferring information from one generation to the next. Now, why did I stick to this? I stuck to it for many, many years for the simple reason that I got feedback that said, Eric, you're doing a great job. What is the feedback that we receive? Well, one is the feedback from our students. And students at the end of the semester actually gave me really high ratings for my lecture. I'm sure you have that everywhere, that there's an end of semester evaluation where students give you a numerical ranking. Well, most of my colleagues didn't want to teach this course because typically pre-meds are not very kind to physicists, and their scores would, drive them close to the edge of suicide, but not so for me. I got, 4.8 out of 5 or 4.5 out of 5. I got really high scores year after year. So that was one criteria. And the other one was that I could give these students some pretty complicated problems I wasn't sure I would do well on an exam. And by and large, they did well. So they liked my lectures. They did well on the exam problems. Obviously, I was doing the right thing. In fact, very quickly, I started to believe that I was the world's best physics teacher. After all, my colleagues weren't able to get high scores and still have their students do well on the exam. Well, it was a very pleasant feeling to, feel that I was the world's best physics teacher, but it turned out to be a complete illusion, a complete house of cards. I mean, nothing could have been further from the truth. As a matter of fact, I was a very lousy teacher if I had measured it by the amount of learning that took place in my course. Now, I can tell you the whole story, but I'm not going to do that. There's plenty of recordings of my confessions of a converted lecturer online. And if you want to know the details of what made me change, then please watch one of those YouTube videos. Instead, I'm going to do something very different. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a very short lecture on a subject that you're probably familiar with even. And then I'm going to give you a test. And then we'll see. Okay? So those are the instructions just to prepare you. And the subject that I've chosen to lecture on, which will be a very short lecture, by the way, no more than maybe 5 minutes, is what might well be your very favorite subject, namely, or your student's very favorite subject, namely Archimedes Principle. Now, you might not have dealt with Archimedes Principle in a while, so let me briefly read the definition of Archimedes Principle as it's given in a typical physics textbook. I forgot which one I copied. Here is one way of phrasing Archimedes principles. An object submerged either fully or partially in a fluid experiences an upward buoyant force, the magnitude of which is equal to the magnitude of the force of gravity exerted on the fluid displaced by the object. That's Archimedes' principle. By the way, Archimedes was a Greek who lived in Syracuse. And he lived during a time that there was a big problem with counterfeit coins, which were supposed to be made from golds, but some people took, a non-precious metal and then coated it with a thin layer of gold, so they didn't really have the value that they should have. And one day, Archimedes was said to have been in the bathtub and noticed that as he put his body in the bathtub, the level of the water went up, which gave him the idea of Archimedes' principle, which we'll discuss in just a second in more detail, and a way of actually solving the problems of the counterfeiting of gold coins. And he's said to have been so excited that he jumped out of the bathtub and ran through the streets of Syracuse naked, running "Eureka, Eureka," which is Greek for "I found it, I found it." So this definition is really a mouthful of words. So let's actually break that down a little bit. Especially there is this statement: the fluid, the volume of fluid displaced by the object. So let me explain what it is. Consider a boat that is floating in a body of water. The fluid displaced by the object that is floating here is essentially the amount of water below the waterline. So whatever is within this little dot line here, that's the volume of displaced fluid. And what Archimedes essentially says that the weight of this displayed water is equal to the weight of the boat, right? I mean, the water that's around the hull of the ship, which is the water outside of this dotted line, is pushing to hold up the water that's inside this dotted line exactly the same way as this ship. Therefore, these two forces, the upward forces have to be the same. Therefore, the downward forces due to gravity have to be the same as well. So that's the crux of Archimedes' principle. It's really beautifully simple. I haven't explained to you yet how to do the things with counterfeit coins, but we won't get to that. But that's really all you need to know in order to answer the test I'm going to give you. So are there any questions? Let me open up the chat so I can see if there are any questions, or feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. There's a great cartoon version of this story. I'd love to see that. No questions? Thank you so much. You know, I knew I was a brilliant lecturer, you know, and you've just reaffirmed my feeling that I give very, very clear lectures. And maybe that's actually one of the problems with a lecture. Let's see, because we'll be able to tell by actually giving you a test. So thank you for sharing that cartoon. I'm going to close the chat again so I don't get distracted here. But this is what we're going to do. I'm going to point you to a platform. I could have used this many different platforms, but I'm going to use one that I use in my class because we're going to use it for the two-stage exam that I'm going to give you at the end of my talk, so that you get the experience of the two-stage test as well. Although, you know, when I do this in the classroom, if you were in person, I would not use any technology at all. I would ask you to test, and then I would ask you to answer by putting your hand on your chest, giving me the answer you think it is. This way, everybody can vote at the same time, 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5. You can have questions with up to 5 choices. And the big benefit of doing this way is that students who are sitting behind cannot see what others vote. So you can all vote at the same time, 1, 2, or 3. You can also use flashcards, but you don't even need flashcards. You can just use the technology called hands. And everybody votes at the same time. So it's not how many of you have won. Nobody's won. I'm going to keep my hand down, right? Otherwise, people are like sheep. They follow each other. This way, everybody votes at the same time. And I tell my students, if you do not put your hand on your chest, I'm going to point at you, ask you to stand up, and tell the entire room what you voted. So they very quickly put their hand on their chest and vote. So, but we're using it. We can't do that here easily because, you know, there's just too many video screens. So we're going to use this platform. So go to this URL. I'm going to put it in the chat. Maybe someone can put it in chat for me. It points you to Learning Catalytics, a demo account. So enter the info. You can enter nonsense info. You don't have to put your real email there. And then join session 407 96710. I think I have a dummy question running there now. I have to go there myself too. Hang on. There. I got the right screen now. Ooh, but I need to move it. Here we go. 57 are on. I'm going to give you a few more minutes. And I am so happy. 98% of you is excited to be here today. I am too. We have one person who is a we'll see. We'll try to see if we can change that person. So get on. I'm going to leave the instructions on the screen, but I'm going to ask you the question. So one test question. And the question is the following. So the instructions are still at the bottom. And for info, you can enter anything you want. You don't have to give away your real email. Otherwise, Pearson may haunt you, which you don't want to do. So enter any info you want. So here we go. This is a situation. A boat carrying a large boulder is floating on a small pond. The boulder is thrown overboard and sinks to the bottom of the pond. So it's no longer floating in the boat, but it's at the bottom as shown in the light gray. And the question is, what happens to the level of the water with respect to the edge of the pond? Will the level of the water have gone up? Will it have gone down? Or will it remain the same? So take a minute to think about this question and then enter your answer. And if you already answered, I see 33 people have answered. And we have A's, B's, and C's. If you've already answered, then ask yourself, if I meet somebody who gives an answer that's different from me, how am I going to convince that person that I am right and he or she is wrong? Thirty more seconds. 20 more seconds. Okay, so if you have not yet made up your mind, and most people have voted, but not everybody. So for those of you who have not yet made up your mind, don't worry. Pick a choice, but don't worry. Nothing depends on the answer you give. Your salary will not be affected. Your promotion chances. This is completely a low stakes test. Okay, But what I want you to do is I want you to pick a choice so that when you're going to go in the breakout room in a second and meet the other members of your team, you at least have a choice to defend. Okay, so here's what I was going to do. I'm going to, I think everybody has voted now. So I'm going to deliver this question again to you. I don't want you to answer it now. I want you to go into the breakout room. You'll meet the other members of your team, and you'll need to do something with your team later in this talk too. You're gonna meet the other members of your team, and I want you, if you don't know them, very quickly introduce yourself, but then take a quick poll about who answered what, and then have the people who have given different answers defend their choices, and then re-enter your answer into Learning Catalytics. And I'll make an announcement for people to do that. So I'm going to ask Sarah to put us now into the breakout rooms, and be sure to talk about which is the right response. And then once you've made up your mind what the right response is, please re-answer the question a second time. So Sarah, please put us in the breakout room. Sarah?
Sorry, it'll take a moment, sorry.
Okay.
Doing it now though.
Just click open rooms. I think I see you did a great job with the.
Sorry, and I have to do them one at a time. Maybe I should have queued it up already.
Well, the other thing is you can just do random assignments now then, because we don't need the real teams yet.
Sorry.
Oh, you still need to put people in the breakout rooms?
No, I'm done with that. I just have to.
So just click open rooms.
Well, I have to assign them to the room. I'm sorry. This is going to take a moment.
Okay. Okay. Bear with me. Meanwhile, since you're still separated from each other, go through your argument. You may even want to take a little note about how your argument is going to work, because you'll discover one thing. Even if you're completely convinced of your answer, you will find that it may take considerable effort to convince somebody who has another answer. And that's what I want you to do. I don't want you to talk to somebody who has the same answer or try to convince somebody who has the same answer. And also, I can tell you the majority of people have the wrong answer for this question. So don't go by, oh, most people have given this answer, this must be the correct answer, because the majority answer is wrong.
Eric, while we're waiting for the groups, we do have a couple of questions. Is it okay if we jump in?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and Sarah, interrupt when you have the breakout rooms, because I don't want to lose momentum here. So let me know when you have people in the breakout rooms. Isa.
Yeah, first in our queue is Michael McConnell. Could you unmute yourself, please, and ask your question?
I wasn't exactly clear on how to vote. Could you say how we were supposed to vote again? Or is this just a vote we keep in our head?
Oh, do you have this platform in front of you? Learning Catalytics? Did you do this?
Okay, I'll have to do that.
Yeah, so you go to this URL, then you enter whatever info you want, doesn't matter really, and then you join session 407-96710.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Next question. Isa? You're muted.
That is
it?
the only raised hand that I see now.
Okay. Sarah, are we done with the assignment of the breakout rooms?
Please give me another 30 seconds.
Okay, I'm timing it. So let's take another question about what I've said so far.
Question? John.
Yes. Go ahead, John.
Sorry, I haven't been using Zoom too much. My school has been using Google Classroom. Breakout rooms, we should get shunted into them, or do we have to manually put ourselves into the breakout room ourselves?
With Zoom, you can set that as a preference. I have made it so that you go into the room by yourself. You can leave the room if you want, and then go back into it later if you want. But the transfer to the rooms is going to be automatic and should be any second now, assuming Sarah has put people into the rooms.
Almost there.
No pressure, Sarah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I've got.
By the way, sorry about all the multiple links for that Archimedes cartoon. I finally did find, though, the actual author. So if you scroll through the comments, you'll see. I finally ran them.
I'm going to look at it while you are debating in the breakout rooms. Okay, Sarah, give me the green light.
Yes, okay, we're ready. So I click open all
Open the
rooms.
breakout room, talk to each other, and then vote when you have the answer. You don't need to agree with each other. So click open rooms.
I have.
Okay, good. So now that you have everybody in rooms, that's great. I'm going to reclaim hosts so I can open them myself next time, and so I can do the broadcasting.
My apologies, Eric. I didn't realize I was supposed to queue them up in there. That was my missing part.
That's
so I had them
okay.
assigned, but I didn't have them in the rooms ready to go. So
No
now
worries.
I understand that. Now I understand that. Sorry. So I've got, let's see if I have anyone left.
We have 9 people who are unassigned.
Yeah, okay, they must have just come on. So
Dan McIsaac, so which room shall I put him in? Greg Morrison.
Can you see, the last room only had 1 person, I think.
And who
there's
who's
a couple,
in there?
There are a couple that are back, coming back.
Or they're not in there yet. Give me a second. I will handle it from here. Breakout rooms. Here we go. Okay, so
Dan needs to be in 27, I believe.
Yeah.
And Greg.
Then I'm going to put
Morrison
Greg
also
in 27. Dan McIsaac also in 27. Tom Petit into 23.
So I think Lamberto came back from 27 because he was the only one in there, perhaps.
Yeah, I put him back. I'm going to rename Dan McIsaac to 27. Dan McIsaac. Rename. I'm going to rename Greg Morrison 27. Greg Morrison. And I'm going to rename. That's it, right?
And then,
Why are they still here? And
yeah.
not in the right rooms? So 27 is kind of, well, there are at least 3 people. Okay, no,
Yeah.
there's 3 people there now.
I don't know
So
why
what
those
about
people came back.
24? Gergana and Pete's iPhone. No, iPhones can't go.
Oh, okay.
And what is the Maya Gardarova is also has not joined. Maya, are you there? I see Maya is in this room. So, and Gergana, it seems that the Bulgarians have trouble.
Okay. Oof, I'm sorry about the snafu on that. I understand it now, though.
Yeah, iPhones can't go. I know that. But Gergana and Maya, I don't know why they're here.
Could they be on iPhones or a phone?
No,
No.
no,
You would say?
they have both video and, but they're not even talking. I'm trying to unmute them and they're not unmuted. Maya, Gergana. Okay. Okay, I'm going to broadcast a message. It's too bad that Maya
Yeah.
and Gergana. Yeah, well, that's okay. Morgan must just have joined. Hello, Morgan. I'm going to put Morgan in breakout room 24. Yeah. Morgan, unassigned, breakout room 24, there. Okay, let's see how many votes we have. Did I broadcast a message? Did you see that?
Be sure to. Yeah.
Morgan is back here for some reason. Sanjay is back here. So Sanjay, I'm going to assign also to 23. Sanjay, did you just join or where's Morgan? Paul
Nugent as well.
Okay, 23. Can you rename the rest? You're able to do that, right?
To 20, to what number? To 23?
Yeah, let's see.
No, I can't.
Know. You can't.
Well, I need to be co-host.
Okay, so I'm going to let you, so take into account that Gergana and Maya, so why don't we, that Gergana and Maya are not going into rooms and are not hearing us, so don't assign them and assign the others. Welcome back. I guess people are there, so I'm going to close the rooms.
Did you make me co-host, Eric?
I'm going to make you host again.
Okay.
And you need to make me co-host then. This way you can do the breakout room assignments. Okay?
Yeah, I don't see it yet.
No, I mean, I closed the room, so everybody's coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're still the host.
I don't see, I see me as just a participant now.
Here, there. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome back. I hope you had a good discussion going. And you know, I popped in only into one breakout room, but it was great to see how lively the discussion was. You got all fired up. I bet that many of you by now have forgotten that my purpose here today is not at all to talk about Archimedes Principle. In fact, Archimedes Principle doesn't even matter because we're here to really discuss the education. The whole you know, the whole question doesn't matter, nor does the answer to the question matter, because in a sense, I've already made my point. Imagine that I'd given the same little lecture to you or to my students or to anybody, and then instead of asking you the question, I would have said, let's now apply this to a boat with a rock in it floating on a pond. I mean, you would have been sleeping through this whole exercise, the lecture plus the application to the question. And the thing that I find really amazing is how easy it is to reawake the innate curiosity of the human mind by changing a story or telling into questioning, right? I mean, as I said before, small children are interested about these things or anything else or how the universe works, and that gets turned off. The good news is, by taking our teaching and doing it through questioning, we can incredibly easily turn that innate curiosity back on. Now, I presume you do want to know what the right answer is, but before I tell you the answer, let's quickly analyze what happened. And in a sense, Tom Petit in his talk yesterday already touched on some of this. I had you think about the question. Then I had you make a commitment. I said to those of you who did not have an answer, you know, just vote. It won't really have any impact on your evaluation, your career, or whatever. So you made a commitment. And after you'd made a commitment, I put you into rooms where you had to externalize your answer. And the one room where I popped in, it was very interesting to see that it was no longer about the answer. It was about how you get to the answer, right? In a sense, this process brings the thinking back into the classroom. It's not about what do you have A? Oh, I'm going to use A too. No, it's about why is it A? The path to the answer becomes more important than the answer itself. And that's really what is important in education. So you move away from the answer or the fact and you focused on the reasoning. But the most important point is, you know, you became emotionally invested in the learning process, because if I were to tell you now, I'm not going to tell you what the answer is, you know, you'd be screaming in the chat, you know, what is the answer? Even though, as I said, I'm not here to talk to you about Archimedes Principle. I'm here to talk to you about teaching. So you have to, though, before I can tell you the answer, vote a second time. 51 out of 97 people have done it, but I would like everybody to go back to the platform and indicate what you now believe to be the right answer. So I'm going to give you 10 more seconds to enter, to register what you now believe to be the right answer. Okay. So, you know, I thought that I gave a pretty darn clear lecture about Archimedes Principle. And so did you, because very few, well, none of you actually asked questions. Only 1/3, no, less than 1/3, 31% of you got the right answer the first time before you discussed it with your neighbors. The correct answer is, you know, I'm here sitting very far away from you. I can feel the suspense. It's just amazing, you know. The chat has gone silent here. The right answer, isn't it just great how you can get people excited about something like a boat floating in a lake? And trust me, if you can do this with Archimedes Principle, you can do it with anything, right? I mean, you can do it with statistics, you can do it with all kinds of subjects that even you don't find fascinating. Okay, let me not keep you in suspense any longer. The correct answer is I need a drum roll here, number 3. And you know what? Let me show you the results. I'm going to show them to you on your platform, so you'll see them there. First time, most people thought B was the correct answer. It's going to be the same. And after discussion, 71%, that's pretty darn good. You know, you did a much better job teaching each other, 40%, than I did myself. And that's because, you know, when you have the wrong way of thinking about it, you don't suffer from the curse of knowledge that I suffer from, because I've thought about this question so much that to me it's completely obvious. Now, again, you're probably thinking only about Archimedes Principle. I really want to go back to education, but let me spend a minute to close the loop here and give you the explanation, right? Remember, what matters is the amount of displaced water. So when we take this rock out of the boat, what will happen to the level of the water in the pond? So imagine if the boat there, you take the rock out. What happens to the level of the water as you take the rock out and lift it up? Will it go up, down? It will go. Can people point on their video so I can see it? It will go down. Correct, yes, because you know the rock in the boat pushes the boat down. So as you take the rock out, it doesn't push as much on the water, and therefore the level of the water will go down. So now the rock is out, the boat is floating more high up, and the level of the water is up. Now, if we put the rock in the boat, sorry, the rock in the water, pardon me, what will happen to the level of the water? It will go back up. So how do we know whether it goes back up more than it went down or less? Well, for that, we need to get to Archimedes Principle. Remember that what matters is the amount of displaced water. So when it's floating in the boat, the amount of displaced water has to be equal to the weight of the rock. Well, otherwise, it wouldn't float. The amount of water has to be equal so that amount of water weighs the same as the rock. How much water is displaced when it's in the water? When it's in the water, it's just the volume of the rock. But we know that rock is denser than water. So therefore, the weight of the rock is a bigger volume of water than the volume of the rock. Maybe that doesn't clinch it completely, but think about this. Think about this. Imagine that it's not a boulder. It's a pea. Tiny, I don't have a pea here or anything that looks like a pea, or a marble. It's a little marble, but that marble is made from neutron star material. It's incredibly heavy, right? So the boat is floating on the lake. We take the marble, we put it in the boat. It pushes the boat down. Let's hope it still remains floating. The water level goes up. Now we lift it out of the boat. The boat goes up, the water level goes down because nothing is pushing on the boat. So we all agree the water level is very much lower. Now we take that marble and we hold it over the edge of the boat and we drop it in the water. What's happening to the level of the water? Not much, nothing, because the volume of that marble is almost nothing. And therefore the level of the water will have gone down. You won't forget this. So back for a moment to this whole little exercise, because there are 2 points I want to emphasize, which Tom already mentioned in his talk. One is my clear lecture on Archimedes Principle wasn't that clear, because if it had really been clear and if it really would have transferred knowledge rather than just information, you would have been able to answer the question. And we often tend to think that the act of lecturing transfers knowledge. No, it transfers information. But the interesting thing is, as you can see on the Learning Analytics platform, the discussion promoted information, promoted aha moments. So when I first discovered this, which was quite a long time ago, I started to realize that my lecturing was really focusing on just one small step in education, namely the information transfer. The actual sense making, the aha moments were not occurring in my class, nor were they occurring that much outside of the class. In a traditional approach to teaching, this takes place in class. And then the sense making is really left to the students on their own, whenever. Some of it might happen in the class, but as so much data shows, most of it does not. So back in 1991, when I first realized that, I actually gave a precursor of the force concept inventory that you heard about yesterday to my students, and discovered that my students didn't even have the concept of force internalized at the end of the semester. That was like, you know, a slap in my face. And that's when I realized that what I really should focus on as a teacher was the sense making, not the information transfer. Gutenberg solved this problem. Oops, pardon me. Gutenberg solved this problem a long time ago, and now we live in an information age. I should really help my students make sense of the information rather than just transferring the information. So I decided then to flip this around. I didn't call it flipping at that time. I call it inverting the classroom, so that the information transfer was before class, and then in class I would focus through questioning, like we just did, on the sense making. So through what I would call peer instruction. So I completely switched my teaching to teaching by questioning. I don't talk like I do to you now, very little. I ask a question, I have the student think, I poll them individually, and you don't need technology for that. Although online you would need technology, but there are plenty of free platforms to do that. I have students discuss in groups, and then I repoll them, and then I either end with an explanation from myself or from one of my students, and this cycle repeats until class time is up. And the aha moments take place during this discussion. That's when the sense making actually occurs. Well, if you go to Google Scholar, you can find, you know, something like 10,000 papers in many different disciplines and at many different levels, from elementary to higher education, that show data proving that this approach gives higher learning gains. In my own class, I was able to triple the learning gain. Triple. So this is not a 10 or 20% increase. No, it's a 200% increase, from like 25 to over 75% normalized learning gain. And studies, such as a study done at Carnegie Mellon, show better retention, right? Because if you have this aha moment, in fact, I think it was one of my students who pointed it out. Once you know it, once you understand it, you know it for life. It's not like you've just memorized it to pass the test. And yes, you may forget the facts, but you learn to trust your reasoning. There was this great talk yesterday about self-efficacy. It actually raises your self-efficacy because you know you can do it. It's not just, you know, you remember it. And you may think, does this only work in physics? Does this only work with questions that have right or wrong answers? No, and that's the beauty of it. It works with anything because it brings the reasoning back in the classroom. Think of a question like this. You're a triage nurse in a pediatric urgent care clinic, and the following patients are waiting. A 3-year-old female with a fever of unknown origin and a temperature of 40 centigrade who is riding a tricycle in the waiting room. A 6-week-old term male baby, chief complaint is fussy breastfeeding, temperature of 38.6. A 14-year-old male with a history of epilepsy who had a seizure at home lasting 5 minutes about half an hour ago. Who would you triage first? There's not a right answer here. And in fact, I would argue even in physics, there's not always a right answer, because the right answer might be predicated on a hidden assumption. So the great thing is, this brings the argument. You would have the same animated discussion in the breakout rooms as you had just a moment ago. Okay, so many of you may think, okay, we've eliminated the transfer of information in the classroom. How do we effectively do that outside the classroom? And I had really not thought about this until I started designing that class that I mentioned to you at the beginning of my talk. Until I wanted to really, truly create a sense of ownership with my students. And that's when I sat down and I said, how can I get my students to take this first step seriously? And then suddenly it hit me. I'd done all kinds of things. I tried just-in-time teaching, quizzes, reading quizzes. But you know, students just find minimum ways of doing it, whatever they need to do in order to pass the quiz, so that they can pretend to have done the information transfer in a meaningful way. And then 5 years ago or 6 years ago, it suddenly hit me. Of course, the solution was so simple and had been staring me in the face all those years, and I just not thought about it. You see, I'd worked hard on making the classroom a more social interaction. I'd never thought about making the out of class component a more social interaction. So we developed a social learning platform called Perusal, which is free. We now have something, I looked this morning, we have 660,000 students around the world using the platform. It's free. You can upload material to it, either in video or in text, both. It used to be only text, but now it's video and text. Or you can even have your school district get a license on the textbook and put the textbook in the platform. So students can log in through their LMS or through a social media platform, whatever they want. It can be integrated with Blackboard, Moodle, Desire to Learn, you name it. I use it through Canvas, so my students log on through Canvas. Many still connect their social networks so that they can find friends online. And once you're on, it looks like an e-reader or a video viewer. With one little twist, you can see who else is online in your classroom. And if you read something or hear something or see something that you have a question about, you can highlight it, which opens a chat window, which looks very much like the chat window on your smartphone or on Facebook. And once you type something in the chat book and hit return, the highlight sticks, and other people who are reading the book or viewing the video either synchronously or asynchronously can see that there is an annotation there, a chat, the beginning of a chat. So after a while, the page will get marked up. There'll be highlights left and right. And in the video, as you're watching the video, bubbles will pop up. And you can actually click on the bubble or the highlight, and it pops up a transcript of the chat. Let me make this a little bit larger. Here is one student who says, at midnight on October 20th, I don't understand how this combination of factor, blah, 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 blah. Half an hour later, 12:38 a.m., another student who's in session SB says, I think you may be able to think about the direction separately, blah, 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 blah. And then 2 days later, third student said, this is a great question. To further elaborate on it, blah, 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 blah. In a sense, it's like an asynchronous peer instruction of students telling each other, helping each other parse the information that is delivered to them. So, one way to get students to participate is the social interaction, which gives them an intrinsic motivation. Another is that we have a machine learning analysis of both the content of the annotation as well as their engagement with the platform, which is integrated with the learning management system and which tells you as an instructor exactly how much every student gets engaged with this platform. So you'll have a pretty good sense of the engagement, but it gets even better than that. You see, in a sense, this discourse between the students is for you as the instructor a window into their brains. You can see what is going on in the discussions. And I have to tell you, when we developed this platform, I was so eager to see what they all wrote. So I kept clicking and clicking and clicking all the highlights. And I went, oh, wow, that's what they're thinking. I had no idea what was going on in the brains of my students when they were reading a text or watching a lecture, because they get hung up on points that I, don't even pay attention to. So my first instinct was to jump in the discussion, which is a bad idea because this should be the students' discussion, not yours, because as soon as you jump in, they're going to expect you to answer all of their questions. So I would urge you, if you adopt this platform, hands off. But I realized very quickly that the points that the students raised in the chat would be perfect for a discussion in the classroom. So we actually found a way in Perusal to connect the pre-class and the in-class activity. So, rather than reading all of the annotations, you can click on a button and you get a report of the main points of confusion of the reading. This is from a class in Florida, in Orlando, where the students were reading a chapter on magnetism. I think this was Knight's book. The algorithm says that the three main points of confusion are the right-hand rule, the direction of the magnetic field, and the Earth's magnetic field. Here's one student who writes, why is it that the magnetic, I guess, field points away from the North Pole of the Earth and towards the South Pole? When on the previous page it stated the direction of the magnetic field is the direction that the North Pole of a compass needle points. Very good question. Knight does not actually say that the North Pole is a magnetic South Pole. So this was a really, really good question. So perfect question for in class. You know, you can say, well, one of you ask this question, cut and paste, and you project the question. And they'll go, wow, he actually read all of our annotations. Well, I read 9 of them, 3 for each topic of confusion, but they can think whatever they want. And this is an additional motivation for the students to participate in it. So the model I've presented here, we have one little exercise left. I know I'll have to wrap up soon, but I don't, since I promised yesterday I'd show you this 2-stage exam, I want to briefly show it to you. So if you adopt this model of, you know, doing the information transfer online using perusal or another mechanism, and in class using sense making, using peer instruction to create newses, this works online. It is online. I mean, suppose instead that on March 13th or whenever it was that I was sent home, when my students were sent home, I was doing the information transfer in the classroom on campus using a synchronous lecture and having the students make sense of the information at home through self-paced asynchronous homework or study. You know, what would I have done? I would have taken this onto online and use it via Zoom. But with my students being spread out around in many different time zones, I would very quickly have had to hit the record button. And then many students would simply have watched the asynchronous recorded lecture. And something really interesting would have happened, because now all of a sudden, in the entire educational process, the student is alone watching the recording at home, alone making sense of the information. Whereas deep down, education is a social process. You have to interact with others. And therefore, you know, the model that I presented, self-paced asynchronous information transfer, but interactive, and instructor-led synchronous sense-making, totally interactive, works well online and is completely interactive. It worked beautifully. I was completely well positioned. Now, and there's data. I didn't show you any data. I'm really very much of a data-driven person, but you know, there's data that shows both of these approaches are based on evidence that they actually work. I see, Rebecca, you have a question. If it's a very short question, I'll take it now. If you don't mind, we wait another 10 minutes and then I'm done with my talk and we can have a discussion.
Let's
Is
wait.
it a short question? Well,
Let's
okay,
wait to
great.
the end.
Great, you're number 1 in the queue. Okay, so back to my project-based course. I decided, you know, to use the project as the backbone for my course, but of course we have a set of scaffolded practices that are loosely arranged according to Bloom's taxonomy at the understand level, at the apply level, and the evaluate level. So this is, in a sense, Bloom's taxonomy upside down, because I think Bloom typically has understanding at the bottom, not at the top. But this is the sequence in which we go through them for each unit and therefore each project in the class. So one part is essentially peer instruction. You've seen it. We do some tutorials, which are actually Lillian McDermott's tutorials that you know, are available both at the K-12 and the higher ed level, where the teams work on these worksheets in a group. Tom mentioned estimation activities that brought a broad smile to my face. So we have estimation 2. We have experimental activities where we teach them how to use their smartphone as an experimental tool, and so that they can take measurements and incorporate that into their project design. And then we have 2 that are evaluative processes. One is a problem set, which is very different. I'm very proud of the way we run problem sets, but I don't have time to talk about this. It was inspired by actually a middle school teacher. Reflection is a huge part of it. I can point you to a video that explains more about how we run these problem sets. This was done in collaboration with the Harvard Graduate School of Education and the guidance of Isa, who is here too. And the last is a readiness assurance activity, which I am going to give to you now, and that will be the end of my talk. So I'm sorry, but like any educational activity, this is ending with a test. I call it readiness assurance activity because I don't want to use the word exam. Also, I do this every week or 2 weeks. I do it very regularly. So rather than being summative, it's much more formative, the exam. Also, it's not as high stakes, and it's a team-based exam. So here's what we're going to do. Please go back to Learning Catalytics and join a new session, which I'm going to start in just a second. No, it's already running. Join session 14666-856. And I want you to enter the number of your team. So it'll ask you for your team number. Look at your name and just enter that number. Okay, some people have been very creative in their name. Ha ha ha, funny bunny. Good. I'm seeing the teams being populated here. You will see who else is in your team. The names that are on the Learning Catalytics are not the same as they are on Zoom, because I told people they could enter random information. But you will soon see who they are really. So please join that session and enter your team number. I'm just making sure that nobody's entering a team. So H-Town, Rebecca, you entered, and Techno, V. Kumari, please join the team of that is reflected in Zoom by the number in front of your name. So V, you should join team 24. And Rebecca Forrest, please help me, Sarah, find Rebecca and what her team assignment is. I don't have it. I'm scrolling through the list. Which one?
3.
Yeah.
3. Rebecca,
3.
you're 3. Constantine. Oh, Constantine joined his real team. So V. Kumari, 24. Not Techno, because you'll be alone in your team. You'll have a very lonely existence. And I see that several teams have only one person. That's bad. Maybe we can adjust. Oh, 24 now is 2. Dan McIsaac, where is the rest of your team? Where did it happen? So Greg Morrison, Lamberto, you're all in 27. Why are you not on? Don't let your team member down. Dan is sitting all alone there. Okay, maybe that got addressed now. Let's see. I just want to avoid teams of 1 because those don't work very well. So no, we still have only, so here's what I'm going to do.
Some people might be having trouble locating the join another session link. It's not obvious.
Okay, can you explain it since you just did it?
If no matter what session you're in, if you're still looking at the boat and the rock screen, down near the bottom, you'll see a couple of options. One of them is a little hyperlink that says join another session. If you click on it, you can then type in the number that you gave us in the chat. Somebody else has very nicely just created a whole URL for it that'll take you there in one click.
Okay. And you know what I can do? What I can do is I could just quit I can just stop the other session. So when I do that, I'm going to stop the boat in the rock session. There, boom. So people will be booted out of that session. Okay. So Robert White, if you end up being alone, join team 27. Okay, during the individual round, you can join another team, because and 27 is where Dan McIsaac is now sitting all alone. So you, Dan, or Daniel, sorry, and Robert are alone. So I would say both congregate in room in team 27 if you end up being alone in a team round. Okay. No, that doesn't work. You won't know. Well, I'll keep an eye on it. Okay. Robert already hopped over to 27. Terrific. Okay. So here are the instructions. I'm going to go in the individual round. You'll have 4 questions. They're not hard questions. They're very easy. Well, some are maybe a little bit harder than others, but you'll have 4 questions. I want you to answer the 4 questions. You have exactly 3 minutes to answer the 4 questions, which is not much time, but that's okay. It's just to get a sense. Here we go. So please mute your microphone and start the individual round now. We have some fast people. Already have close to 10% of the people have flown through all the questions. And even if you don't get to finish, no worries, because you'll have a second shot at the questions with your team.
If we're supposed to be doing this with our teams, shouldn't our microphones be on?
You will see. I'll put you I'll put you in breakout rooms, and then the microphone will be on. Thanks for the clarifying question. Okay, 30 more seconds left. Okay. So I'm going to request that you take your hands off the keyboard until you are in your breakout room. Because if you still have your hands on the keyboard, you might do something that you will regret later. Let me explain. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to put the program into the team round in a second. And I'm going to put you in the breakout rooms. The first thing that you need to do when you're in the breakout room is designate a responder. So you need to assign one of the people in your team to be the person who is going to answer for the team. Everybody can answer, but you want only one person to do it. And that person should get a consensus before he or she puts in any answers. It's probably a good idea to have the responder share the screen so that everyone can see what the responder is doing. Now, the reason I want your hands off the keyboard now is because as soon as I put it in the team round, if an answer comes in from an individual, it will be the team's answer. And if it's wrong, your team is going to be very unhappy with you. So hands off the keyboard, okay? Hands off the keyboard. I can't warn you enough, okay? So I'm going to start the team round with everybody here, which I don't typically do, but I'm going to do it here. So keep your microphone still muted because I want you to see something. So the team round has started now, and your screen should have reloaded. And at the top, there should be a new option. I forgot exactly how it's worded. I don't see it because I have the instructor screen, but it says reveal the answers of your team or see your team's responses. So there you can see how everybody else has responded. So you can see it for each of the 4 questions. Somebody already answered for the team. This person is going to be so unpopular. So be careful. Don't answer until you have agreement with your team. Okay, I said hands off the keyboard. Okay, we'll find out who that is in just a second. Be sure to chide that person and don't make that person the responder. Okay, so I'm going to put you in the breakout rooms. I'm juggling a lot of responsibilities here. Breakout rooms, there we go. And you will have 5 minutes to reach consensus on those questions and see what happens when you've answered all questions. So if you answer a question as a team incorrectly, you get a second shot at it for half credit. So 4 points if you get it right on the first try, 2 points if you get it right on the second try, 1 point if you get it right on the third try, 0 points, but the answer is revealed and the explanation is revealed if you still get it wrong. Good luck. See you soon. Sarah,
Yes.
can you come on?
Yeah.
I see we still have a few people who are unassigned.
Okay.
Jose, I'm going to put it in 28.
Yeah.
And Alethea Edwards. Are you there, Alethea? And I see some people who are not going into their room for one reason or another. So Alethea, I'm going to put her in which team?
Maybe 28, they might have only had 3.
21 only has 2.
Oh, okay. People have dropped off and maybe come back on.
Yeah, maybe.
There's now Joe Michnick.
Joe Michnick. Was he assigned to a room?
I don't recall that name. I did it quickly.
Sorry, I was in team 1. My
You were.
internet just went at my house. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to put you back in. I'm going to put you back in 1.
No, I got
Thank you.
booted and then I came back.
Who is speaking
Who was
there?
that?
Somebody said something, but I didn't hear.
Yeah,
And
she
there are-
said she got booted and came back, but not sure who she is.
Okay, and Margaret is in 14, so I'm going to put her in 14. Kelly was in 18, but I don't know if Kelly's still here. Okay, now everybody is assigned, but we still have a couple of stragglers. Kristen, can you hear me, Kristen? You should be in room 15. For some reason, I see a couple of people who are not in their room. So if you're not in your team room, if you're not talking to your team members, then please click on Dagmara and Dr. Shu and Jose and Kimwell. Click on breakout rooms and join your breakout room. You should have been automatically assigned. So Deborah Edwards, are you just joining? Please unmute yourself. Deborah Edwards.
Yes, sorry. No, my internet went down and I was like in and then out, and I'm just now trying to.
Okay, sorry about that.
I'm
Were you assigned to a team?
Yes, 11 was mine.
11. I'm going to put you back in 11.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Carrie.
Also, Zhang was in a room before, and are you on, Zhang?
Yeah, I am.
Sure.
It was 21. My Wi-Fi also went down.
Sure. Okay,
Okay.
21 again?
21.
Thank you.
And Carrie. Carrie Guarnera. Carrie, please unmute yourself.
My Wi-Fi went down, so I haven't even been in the discussion. So I'm sorry. So.
Were you assigned to a team before?
Yes, I was assigned to number 5, and I was in the list, and then my internet went down, so my computer screen.
Oh, okay. No worries. I'm going to put you back in 5.
Okay.
Okay. So Pete's iPhone, that doesn't work. Paul, for some reason, Paul is not in a breakout room and hasn't joined.
Yeah. Rob Sheffield,
Therese.
is Rob there?
Paul or Teresa or Kimwell de Casto. Unmute yourself. I guess they must have either internet connection or some other problem. I don't know. Gergana, we already knew. Dr. Shu. Okay, Rob Sheffield. Okay, I'm going to take a few more minutes, okay? And then since there was so much interest in this team-based exam.
Kamul, are you there now? He was assigned.
Yeah, Eric, there's also, there was one question that I wanted to put on your radar about, generated a lot of conversation about what to do when students, let me see how it was worded. What about students who don't do the information transfer first? This participant finds a large number of the students wait until the last minute to do the flip portion. So that generated a lot of conversation. And I thought maybe it's something you could address.
Yeah. So are any participants who are still here in the main room?
I was on section 14 and somehow you put me on 28. I don't know what happened. And 28 is empty, it's only me.
Okay, so I'm going to put, Jose, I'm going to put you in, sorry about that, 28.
14.
I'm going to put you in 14?
Yeah, that's where I was before. That was the number was next to my name.
Okay.
So I just type a different name. I just put my initials there. That's probably why you didn't see me.
Okay, I put you in 14.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see if there's anybody else. Adela Ramirez. Please unmute yourself.
Lost internet and I just got it back.
So which team were you?
I'm on 10 in 10.
I'm going to put you back in 10, okay?
Okay, thank you.
That works pretty well, huh? Except for the people who are clearly not at their computers.
Yeah, Margaret Chung was having trouble getting on. She said still can't get on at 11:23. That was a while ago though, I guess.
Yeah.
So maybe she worked it out. I'll ask her.
Yeah. It's a pretty big class too to handle. Yeah. Okay, we have 18 people who have completed the team round.
Eric, I had to take a phone call and step away for a little bit.
Yes.
What did you want me to do here? I'm kind of confused.
Well, you were supposed to be in room 25 with the rest of your team, and you are assigned. So if you click on breakout room at the bottom, you should see a way to join your team again.
Okay, hold on. Breakout room. Okie dokie, thank you.
Good.
Kelly Miller is back. Are you, Kelly, are you on?
No, she's teaching. I know she's teaching.
Okay.
So quick question, guys. Are we still on pace for 11:50 for our first video?
Oh, 11:50 for video. Yeah, I'm broadcasting a message here for people to come back.
Well, it shows you a 15-minute break after this, but I guess maybe we're just going to go through that.
Yeah, maybe I'll take a few questions and then we'll hand it over. Team 4 and team 8. Good job. Did you see the sort of the scoring at the bottom of your screen? Yeah. So you have an idea of how it works.
Yeah, we saw that.
Good. And there's a very low technology way of doing this too. But it's hard to do online because you need technology for online. I'm going to tell them to wrap up. 30 seconds left. $15 seconds left. Good, people are coming back. I see teams 4, 5, 24, 22. Very good. Almost everybody's back. I'm going to just yank people out of their rooms because we need to end. Where's my participant list? Here. So people are coming back. So those of you who are back, you should see on your screen, when you've answered everything, you should see sort of an accounting. You should see how much you got correct individually. This is an example from one that had 5 questions. This shows whether you got the questions correct on the first attempt, the second, the third, or not at all. And then essentially, this is your individual score. This is your team score. And then the actual score each person gets is an average between the team score and the individual score. If you have not yet completed the test, let's see, 71, no, not everybody has. Just type in some random answers at this point, just so you see that screen. I know you can no longer talk to your team, but it doesn't really matter, but you get a sense for it. And you see how, well, you don't see that here. I can see it on my screen, that the team score is always higher than the individual score. The only way that can happen is if no individual gets 100%. So you have to make these tests hard enough so that no individual gets 100% in the individual round. That was obviously not the case here. Also, if you do it online, you have to make your questions not Googleable, right? Because students have access to Google, which in my opinion is a good idea, because any question to which the answer can be Googled is not really an authentic assessment question. But here's the best thing. There is no grading. None. The grading is done. You have to put a little bit more effort up front, but there is no grading. It's done automatically. That's one of the beauties. And if you don't want to use technology, which you might very well not want to use, there are low-tech ways. There's the FAT scratch card, which I referred to already yesterday. I need to wrap up.
Just a fast comment. Just a fast comment. Question 2, for example, if you type 1 kilogram, the way you ask the question, 1-kilogram, give you incorrect answer.
Let me show you.
Yeah, 1.0 and got the wrong answer.
So there's some problem.
You forgot the units.
No. But if you type like you type on your question.
Okay, well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let me show you my screen where I see exactly what you're talking about. Here we go. So let's go there. So here you see in green the right answers, and in red the wrong answer. 1 Newton is not correct. 1 kilogram is correct. 1 is not correct. Now here is a problem, which is the hyphen. Okay.
That's right. That's what we did before. Then we tried another one, and we never got it right.
Yeah. So but that's easily addressable. I could go in and manually score that correctly. The hyphen is only used when you use it as an adjective rather than a noun. And that's why the platform doesn't recognize that. But 1.0 kilogram is fine. If you'd written down 1,000 gram, it would also be correct. If you would have written 2.2 pounds, it would also have been correct. So it knows exactly how to convert units and so on. And the other thing is, look also how it interprets mathematics. I mean, you could have added, here somebody said x equals, even though that's not strictly necessary, it counted it correct. If you had written 3 minus 4y plus sine 0, it would also have been counted correct. So yes, some notation like this hyphen, it doesn't recognize, because strictly speaking, that is not the right way of expressing it. But I understand if a student does this in my class, I quickly go into review the results, which you can do in the interface, and I manually count it correct. Okay, but I'm not here to demonstrate that, because as I said, the technology is not really that relevant. You can do this without any technology by using these if-at scratch cards, which work beautiful. And that's what I initially did in my class before Learning Catalytics came around. I hope that I've convinced you that information is not just about transferring information or getting our students to do what we do. I want my students to stand on my shoulders. I want them to solve problems that I cannot solve. I want them to be able to get higher. And I think that's what we need to. We want the next generations to solve the problem that this generation can't solve. I mean, there's so many problems in the world: conflict, energy, healthcare, you name it. And this generation is not able to solve it. We must equip the next generation with the tools to do that. And I think the only way to do it is this social interaction that we've demonstrated here. So I'm going to take 1 or 2 questions, and then unfortunately we have to move on. I'm sorry I took more time, but it was because I got overly ambitious and wanted to fulfill some of the requests that were asked yesterday. I'm so sorry, and I'm grateful for your patience. I'll stick around during all the breaks and be happy to talk either at the congregate tables or here in the main room in Zoom. And I know that, who was it who had a hand up very patiently before V and Drew? Must be somebody who lost internet connection and now the hand is down.
Yeah, it was me, Carrie Ganeri. I had my hand up.
Yes.
But I think there was another lady before me that you said to wait. So there was another lady before me.
I think
Claim
it may
your...
have been me.
Yes, it was you, Rebecca.
Yes, it was you, Rebecca. So Rebecca, you go first, and then who was it who just spoke?
It was Carrie.
Carrie. So Rebecca, yeah. Carrie, then V, then Drew, then we go on to the next session.
So
Rebecca.
I love peer instruction. I've been doing it for a very long time. Right now, I am trying to figure out how to best implement it in the fall. In the spring, I was using Teams, and I was totally online, and I was using forms for students to answer questions, and that worked fine. In the fall, my university is going to be trying to have both online and face-to-face sessions. So I'm going to have groups in class, and I need some technology that is going to work for everybody with Teams. And I don't know if we should talk about this later, or if you have suggestions, or if anyone else has suggestions for different ways to do that. My university uses Turning Point clickers.
I see. So I use Turning Point clickers for a long time. So first of all, if you use Teams, what I recommend is, we renamed you, remember, for this session. Mm-hmm. That's, by the way, I turned on the ability for you to rename yourself again, so you can remove the number now and you can add your pronouns behind it if you want, if you so desire. So I rather than renaming my students, I tell my students, you're in team 1, you're in team 2, you're in team 3, and they rename themselves. Okay, so I don't have to do any of that. And then the assignment in the breakout rooms in Zoom is very quick because you just create as many breakout rooms as you want. And then you say assign, and you do check, check, check all the ones in one, check, check, check all the twos in two. So that's very quick. But then for polling, when I've demonstrated this online, I shy away from using Learning Analytics because it's a commercial platform. You can license it from Pearson. If you use textbooks from Pearson, it often comes with it. I have used Poll Everywhere. There are many like Mentimeter and a number of others. So maybe we can sort of collect in the chat later or in Slack a number of resources that can be used for online polling. But there are more and more that now work that you can use in parallel. I do not recommend using the polling in Zoom. I used it, and then I noticed that the whole instruction didn't work that well. The reason is the poll does not follow you into the breakout rooms. So you give the poll in the main room, and then you send people in the breakout room, and the poll is gone. They don't see it anymore. And if it's a question that has many choices, they don't even remember which choice is what. So the poll in Zoom does not work for the peer instruction. You need to have some platform that people can take with them in the breakout room, like Learning Analytics. I see Celestina here having a recommendation. So I hope that that helps. Rebecca, where are you? There you are, I see. And maybe we can continue to share resources. Carrie, you're next.
Okay. Yes, sir. So in your lecture, and I loved it because like you said, you used, I guess, whatever your terminology was, and now they say flipped. So I was making a list. It says, you really don't lecture anymore. You present a question, and then you have them think about it, you poll it, discuss it, repoll, and explain. So where do they get the meat of the understanding of forces? Let's say, do you just on introduction of forces? I mean, I'm teaching obviously at the high school level, so they don't know anything. So if I pose a question, we're obviously trying to see prior knowledge. And then when do you actually give them their information? After you figure out that they either got it wrong or what?
Both before and after, right? So I hope that before they come to class, they've at least been exposed to the equivalent of a lecture.
Okay,
which is not, which as we know is not much. So I do it by having them read and interact and annotate using the platform Perusal that I just mentioned. Okay. That's my current approach because I find that that works the best for me. You can also have them annotate a recorded lecture or anything else you want, or you could use just-in-time teaching, which is a technique you can read more about at jitt.org. Yeah,
okay, so they basically are responsible for, like you said, their own learning. They're going to go and do it before they even come to class. So I teach obviously on-level physics.
Define learning.
Well, I'm saying do the pre-reading or the pre-understanding of the lecture. And again, I teach seniors that are ready to get out of school. They're on level. Now my AP kids will do it. They will because they want that grade or they want that whatever. But that's what my question was, is you give them pre-assignment, so to speak, the pre-learning, the pre-reading, the pre-whatever, and then we come to class, discuss, and then reinforce the correct understanding.
Yeah, I would not have too high expectations of the pre-reading. I mean, even for Harvard students. There's only so much you get out of it, but then even my stellar lectures got very little done in terms of understanding. So the pre-reading at least gets the definitions out of the way. I mean, the sort of the very, 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 very basic stuff. And one of the ways to reinforce the intrinsic motivation is to connect what you do in the class to the feedback that you get from the pre-class assignment. Right? If I'm a student and I struggle with something and I say, I don't understand this, can somebody explain this to me? Students jump in, and then you, as the instructor in class, say, hey, Carrie Guarnera, before coming to class, posted this on Perusal or asked this question, and now you show the question. You'll go, wow, actually, it helps when I, verbalize my misunderstanding, and I have a chance of getting help from either other students in my class or from the instructor and from the in-class activities, because it connects the out of class with the in-class.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This was a wonderful talk.
Well, thank you, and I'm sorry it was too long. V, and I think somebody else had a hand up, but it went down. But let's go to V, and I'll take one more question after that.
Yeah, it's a brief two-part question. Sometimes I've been using Perusal and it doesn't generate confusion report. Do you have a solution for that? And the second part of the question is, what do you do once it generates confusion report? How do you go about using those questions in class?
Right. So if that's a good point, V. Thank you for raising that. So if the number of annotations is too small, it cannot generate a confusion report. But if the number of annotation is small, then you might as well read them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think the confusion report is good when you have a big class like I have. But it's not that important if you have a class of 20 students, because you can probably click here and there and get a pretty good feel for the questions they're asked.
Yeah.
Some instructors will actually in class give a report of the questions and mention the students.
Yeah.
Oh, Sophia had this question yesterday. Let's talk about this question. Typically what I do is I bounce the question back at the student. So rather than saying, Sophia had this question, here's the answer, I say, Sophia had this question, let's discuss it. And I use it in a peer instruction cycle. Because then it sticks, rather than students just writing down what the answer is and trying to memorize it. So that's how I use it, whether it comes from the confusion report or just from reading the questions when they're small in number. It's not that big a difference.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question. Drew, you get the last question.
Oh boy, no pressure, huh? This may be too big of a question even. So if I can talk about this afterwards, that'd be great. I was wanting to talk about lab work and experiments, given that I'm assuming since all your students are going to be online at Harvard, I guess, what are your thoughts about either synchronous or asynchronous lab work? And then what role or how can socialization play a role in online lab work, where you don't have the physical social presence that you would in in-person labs?
Yes, that's a very good point, and that's indeed a very big question. I could give a 90-minute talk about that. I think the important point to keep in mind is that what we are really trying to accomplish in our courses, you and I, all of us, and I realize I'm speaking on behalf of many people here, and you may not agree with my statement, and if so, say that. I think what we really are trying to teach is a way of thinking. Physics, in a sense, is a process. It's not about memorizing facts or even memorizing procedures. Or physics is a way of thinking, and I have found that you can accomplish that goal in many different ways. And when I was first faced with moving my project-based course online in the spring, my immediate reaction was, oh my God, this is a tremendous challenge. And I was trying to think, how can I map this online? How can I map that online? Rather than what I ended up doing is thinking, how can I seize the new opportunities? Think about this workshop, right? I mean, we've planned this as a 25 in-person workshop at Harvard. Many of you would not have been there. We've been able to accomplish more by virtue of being online. Now, I mean, you probably don't want that in your classes and get 75 additional students. But still, there might be things you can do by reaching out to the community, by having a community-based project, by putting the problem in another context. Are there things you can find around the house to do a meaningful measurement? And I find that the biggest problem is really the limits of our imagination, and the problem that I had even when I started teaching, that it's very hard to think out of the box. We're not trained to to do that with respect to our teaching. But if you let your imagination flow there, and if you're not so wedded to the content and more focused on physics as a way of thinking and the skills that you want to teach, I think there are plenty of opportunities. And I'm happy to talk about that informally later, but I really need to zip up my mouse here. I've had way too much floor time here, many more than I even wanted. So my apologies again. And thank you all for participating in this. I hope it was useful, and I'll be happy to follow up with anybody who wants more information. Thank you all.